The morning sun filtered through the windows of Lincoln High School's science lab as 16-year-old Destiny Williams carefully adjusted her protective goggles. Her natural hair, a beautiful crown of carefully maintained curls that she'd spent years growing, framed her face as she prepared for her chemistry experiment. The lab teacher, Mrs. Chen, approached her desk with concern in her eyes. "Destiny, you know the lab safety rules," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "Hair needs to be tied back during experiments." She held out a hair tie, trying to be helpful. Destiny reached for her bag, searching for her silk scrunchie, the only type that wouldn't damage her delicate curls, but couldn't find it. "I must have left it at home," Destiny explained, her voice steady but worried. "I can't use regular hair ties, Mrs. Chen. They'll break my hair. Could I maybe work with my lab partner from the back of the room today, away from the Bunsen burners?" Mrs. Chen hesitated, clearly torn between safety protocols and understanding her student's situation. Before she could respond, another student had already pressed the classroom phone's intercom button, calling the office. "Mrs. Chen needs assistance with a student refusing to follow lab safety rules," the voice announced smugly. Within minutes, the classroom door opened. Instead of the expected guidance counselor or vice principal, Officer James Miller strode in, his boots squeaking against the freshly waxed floor. The school's new resource officer had been on duty for less than a month, and already students whispered about his harsh approach to discipline. "What seems to be the problem here?" Miller's voice carried across the now silent classroom. 24 pairs of eyes darted between him and Destiny, who sat straight backed in her chair, hands folded calmly on the desk despite her racing heart. "Officer Miller, this really isn't necessary," Mrs. Chen began, stepping between him and Destiny's desk. "We're just discussing lab safety requirements." "Stand aside, ma'am," Miller cut her off, his hand already resting on his belt. "This is a safety issue, and safety issues fall under my jurisdiction." Destiny took a deep breath, channeling the strength she'd learned from her mother, a respected civil rights attorney. "Sir, I understand the safety concerns," she began, her voice clear and respectful. "I'm happy to move to the back of the room, away from any fire hazards. Or I can sit this experiment out and do a written assignment instead." But Miller wasn't listening. His face hardened as he looked at Destiny's hair, his prejudice barely concealed behind his badge. "This isn't up for debate. Either tie it back or come with me to the principal's office." The air in the room grew thick with tension. Students had their phones out now, sensing something was very wrong. Mrs. Chen was already dialing the principal's direct line, her hands shaking slightly. "I choose the principal's office," Destiny said quietly, gathering her books. She'd learned from her mother that sometimes the best way to handle authority wasn't to fight it head-on, but to document everything and fight it the right way. As they walked down the hallway, Miller's walkie-talkie crackled with static. He could have been responding to actual emergencies, helping students who were truly in trouble. Instead, he was escorting a straighter student to the office because of her hair. The principal's office was warm and bright, with student artwork covering the walls and a small shelf of books about educational leadership and cultural understanding. Principal Rivera looked up from her computer, her eyes widening at the sight of Officer Miller leading one of her top students into her office. What happened next would spark a firestorm that nobody in the school could have predicted. The security camera in the corner of the office whirred silently, its red light blinking as it recorded every moment of what was about to unfold. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments, and this ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become anything but ordinary. Principal Rivera's office fell silent as Officer Miller closed the door behind them. The only sound was the gentle hum of the aging air conditioner and the tick-tock of the wall clock that had kept time in this office for over 20 years. Destiny sat in one of the worn leather chairs, her chemistry textbook clutched to her chest like a shield. "Would someone please explain what's happening here?" Principal Rivera asked, removing her reading glasses and placing them carefully on her desk. Before anyone could answer, Officer Miller stepped forward, his badge catching the fluorescent light. "This student is refusing to comply with safety regulations," he stated, his voice carrying that false authority that some people use when they know they're overstepping but can't stop themselves. "Her hair is a clear violation of lab safety protocols." Principal Rivera's eyes softened as she looked at Destiny. Is this about the chemistry lab? Mrs. Chen just messaged me that you offered to do an alternative assignment. Yes, ma'am, Destiny replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. I forgot my silk scrunchie today, and regular hair ties damage my natural hair. I suggested working from the back of the room or doing a written assignment instead. The principal nodded, turning to Officer Miller. Well, it seems we have several reasonable solutions here. Destiny can either. But Miller wasn't interested in solutions. His face had taken on that particular shade of red that comes from wounded pride rather than actual anger. This is about following rules, he interrupted, taking a step closer to Destiny's chair. If she can't follow simple rules, what else is she willing to ignore? Principal Rivera stood up, her chair rolling back against the wall. Officer Miller, that's entirely inappropriate. This is a minor classroom management issue that doesn't require. The next few moments happened so fast they seemed to blur together. Miller reached for the scissors that sat in the pencil holder on Principal Rivera's desk, the ones she used for art projects with troubled students. Before anyone could react, he grabbed a handful of Destiny's carefully maintained curls. No, Principal Rivera shouted, already reaching for her phone. But the scissors made their awful snicking sound, and chunks of Destiny's hair fell to the floor like broken promises. Destiny didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, she did exactly what her mother had taught her to do in the face of injustice. She stayed calm and documented everything. Her trembling fingers found her phone in her pocket and pressed record, capturing Miller's reflection in the office window as he continued his assault on her hair. Principal Rivera was already on the phone, her voice sharp with urgency. I need police dispatch immediately. Officer Miller is assaulting a student. Yes, battery and civil rights violation in progress. Send internal affairs. Now. 2 students passing by the office window stopped in their tracks, phones out and recording. The school secretary burst in, took one look at the scene, and immediately hit the lockdown button, not to keep anyone out, but to keep Miller in. You're making this worse for yourself, Destiny said quietly, her phone still recording as more of her hair fell. Each snip of the scissors felt like a physical blow, but she remembered her mother's words. Sometimes the biggest weapon against injustice is staying calm enough to document it. Miller seemed to be in some kind of trance, muttering about rules and respect and authority. He didn't notice the growing crowd outside the office window, all with phones raised. He didn't hear the distant sound of police sirens. He didn't even seem to register Principal Rivera's continued demands for him to stop. The secretary had pulled up the security camera feed on her computer, making sure every angle was being recorded. She'd also sent an emergency alert to all staff members, and teachers were now stationed in the hallway, keeping other students back but allowing them to record what was happening. Through it all, Destiny sat straight-backed in her chair, tears sliding silently down her face, but her phone held steady. She thought about her mother, who'd fought cases like this in court. She thought about her grandmother, who'd told her stories about similar injustices from decades past. She thought about her little sister, who loved to play with her hair while they watched movies together. The sound of heavy boots in the hallway signaled the arrival of backup officers, but the damage was done. Destiny's beautiful curls lay scattered on the floor like fallen soldiers, and a piece of her childhood innocence lay there with them. What Miller didn't realize was that in trying to exert his power, he'd given Destiny something much stronger: evidence, witnesses, and a platform to create real change. As the door burst open and officers rushed in, Destiny finally lowered her phone. She'd captured everything. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. This wasn't just about her hair anymore. This was about every student who'd ever felt powerless in the face of authority. This was about making sure it never happened again. The hallways of Lincoln High School buzzed with a different kind of energy now. Students spoke in hushed whispers, their phones practically glowing hot from sharing videos of what had just happened. The morning sun still streamed through the windows, but it felt colder somehow, as if the whole building was holding its breath. In the nurse's office, Destiny sat on the edge of a paper-covered exam bed, wrapped in a soft blanket the school counselor had brought from her office. The nurse, Mrs. Thompson, gently examined her scalp for any cuts or scrapes, her touch careful and motherly. "You're so brave, sweetheart," Mrs. Thompson murmured, applying a cool compress to a small scratch near Destiny's temple. Your mother is on her way." Down the hall, Principal Rivera was orchestrating a masterclass in crisis management. Her office had become command central, with the school resource officer's supervisor, Lieutenant Chen, reviewing security footage on one screen while the district superintendent watched the growing social media storm on another. "Over 3,000 shares already," the superintendent said, shaking his head. "The media's going to be here any minute." As if on cue, the school secretary's voice crackled over the intercom. "There are news vans pulling into the parking lot." Principal Rivera straightened her blazer, years of experience visible in the determined set of her shoulders. "Lock down the media in the front office. No one gets near my students without parent permission and proper credentials." The sound of clicking heels echoed through the hallway, sharp, purposeful steps that made everyone turn. Destiny's mother, Mrs. Williams, strode toward the nurse's office, her law partner right behind her with an open laptop. They dropped everything the moment they got the call, rushing from the courthouse where they'd been preparing for another civil rights case. The reunion between mother and daughter happened behind closed doors, away from prying eyes and camera phones. Mrs. Williams wrapped her arms around Destiny, and for the first time since the incident, Destiny allowed herself to really cry. "I did what you taught me, Mom," she whispered between sobs. "I stayed calm. I recorded everything." "You did more than that, baby," her mother replied, running her hands over what remained of Destiny's hair. "You showed incredible strength. Now let me handle the rest." Outside, the school parking lot was transforming into something resembling a movie set. News vans jockeyed for position while police cars created a protective barrier around the building. Officer Miller sat in the back of one of those cars, his badge and gun already confiscated, staring straight ahead as if he still couldn't believe what he'd done. Inside the school, a different kind of movement was taking place. Students who had never spoken up before were sharing their own stories of encounters with Officer Miller. The basketball captain talked about being followed through the halls. The debate team president mentioned random locker searches that didn't seem random at all. The school counselor's office had become an impromptu support center. Students dropped off cards for Destiny, while others shared posts about natural hair rights and police reform. The art club was already working on posters for a planned walkout, their paint-stained hands creating messages of solidarity. Mrs. Williams emerged from the nurse's office, her lawyer's notepad filled with detailed notes. Lieutenant Chen approached her, his face grave. "Mrs. Williams, we want you to know that the department takes this very seriously. Miller's been placed under arrest, and we're conducting a full investigation." "That's a start," Mrs. Williams replied, her voice steady but sharp as steel. "But this isn't just about one officer. This is about a system that made him think he could get away with it." In the teacher's lounge, Mrs. Chen from the chemistry lab sat with her head in her hands, blaming herself for making the initial safety request. Other teachers gathered around her, offering comfort and sharing their own guilt about times they might have enforced rules without considering their deeper impact. Principal Rivera's voice came over the intercom, steady and clear. "Students and staff, please remain in your current locations. We're implementing an early dismissal protocol. Parents have been notified and are arriving to pick up their children. Remember, we are Lincoln Lions, and we take care of our own." As students began filing out to waiting cars, many stopped by the nurse's office window, pressing their hands against the glass in silent support. Inside, Destiny had finally stopped crying. Her mother was on the phone with national civil rights organizations, her law partner was drafting emergency motions, and the school district's lawyers were already talking about policy changes. Destiny caught her reflection in the window, her hair uneven, her eyes red from crying, but her spine straight and her gaze steady. She thought about all the other students who might face similar situations, all the rules that needed changing, all the voices that needed to be heard. This wasn't the end of something, she realized. It was just the beginning. The police station buzzed with unusual activity as Lieutenant Chen walked through the door, his face set in grim determination. Behind him, 2 internal affairs officers escorted Officer Miller, who looked much smaller now without his badge and gun. The booking officer at the front desk straightened up, sensing this wasn't a routine arrest. "Process him," Lieutenant Chen ordered, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Full booking, no special treatment." In the fingerprinting room, Miller finally seemed to realize the gravity of his situation. His hands trembled as the booking officer rolled each finger across the ink pad. "I was just enforcing the rules," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Rules. The booking officer, a veteran of 20 years, looked at him with disgust. "I've got a teenage daughter myself. What you did wasn't enforcing rules, it was assault on a minor." Meanwhile, across town at the district attorney's office, Mrs. Williams sat in a conference room with her legal team and the DA herself. Videos from students' phones played on a large screen, each angle showing the incident in devastating clarity. The school's security footage provided an unblinking record of every moment. "This is one of the clearest cases I've ever seen," the district attorney said, pausing a frame where Miller's face was clearly visible as he wielded the scissors. "We're charging him with assault, battery, civil rights violations, and abuse of power under color of authority." Mrs. Williams nodded, her hand clutching a small bag containing locks of Destiny's hair, evidence collected by the school nurse. "And the pattern of behavior." "We've already pulled his personnel files," one of the assistant DAs replied, lifting a thick folder. "There were complaints at his previous precinct, all buried until now." Back at the police station, the chief of police held an emergency press conference on the front steps. News cameras crowded the space as he spoke, his words careful but firm. "What happened today at Lincoln High School goes against everything we stand for as a police force," he announced, the morning sun harsh on his face. "We're conducting a full investigation into not just this incident, but all previous complaints against Officer Miller. We serve the community, all of the community, and there's no place for bias or abuse of power in our department." Inside the station, internal affairs investigators worked through Miller's past cases with growing concern. Files spread across their desks showed a pattern: complaints from minority students, aggressive enforcement of minor infractions, reports of intimidation, all dismissed or buried by previous supervisors. "Look at this," one investigator said, holding up a report. 3 months ago, he gave a student detention for speaking Spanish in the hallway. Principal Rivera overturned it, but it never made it into his official record. Lieutenant Chen stood in the observation room, watching Miller through the two-way mirror of the interrogation room. The former officer sat alone at the table, his uniform replaced with standard-issue orange. Every few minutes, he would touch his chest where his badge used to be, like someone checking for a missing limb. The lieutenant's phone buzzed. Another update from the school. Students had organized a peaceful demonstration for the next day. Local barbershops and hair salons were offering free services to show support for Destiny. The teachers' union was pushing for mandatory cultural sensitivity training. "Sir," a young officer appeared at the door, holding a tablet. "You need to see this." The tablet showed social media exploding with support for Destiny. #JusticeForHerCrown was trending nationwide. Videos of the incident had millions of views. Civil rights organizations were calling for nationwide reform of school resource officer programs. In the DA's office, prosecutors worked late into the evening, building an airtight case. They knew this wasn't just about one incident or one officer, it was about setting a precedent. "We can't take any chances," the DA told her team, surrounded by case files and coffee cups. "This needs to be handled perfectly. The whole country is watching." As night fell, Miller was led to his cell, the same cells he put so many others in over the years. The sound of the door locking echoed with finality. Through his small window, he could see the media trucks still parked outside, their satellite dishes reaching up into the darkening sky like metal fingers pointing toward justice. In the holding area, Lieutenant Chen made one final call to Mrs. Williams. "We're holding him without bail," he informed her. The judge agreed he's a potential flight risk. "You have my word, he'll face every charge." "Thank you," Mrs. Williams replied, her voice tired but determined. "But this isn't just about punishing one person. This is about changing the system that gave him that power in the first place." As she hung up, Mrs. Williams looked at her daughter, who had finally fallen asleep on the living room couch, exhausted from the day's events. A local hair artist had already volunteered to help style what remained of her hair, turning the uneven cuts into a beautiful, shorter style. Even in sleep, Destiny's face showed strength, the kind that comes from standing up to injustice and knowing you're not standing alone. The morning after the incident, Lincoln High School looked different. Students arrived to find the front lawn covered with handmade signs of support. Local hair salons had set up a small tent city, their chairs ready to offer free styling services to anyone who needed them. The message was clear: this community stood together. "Look at this," Principal Rivera whispered, standing at her office window. The local news crews were still there, but they were being overshadowed by something more powerful: community action. Parents had formed a human chain around the school, creating a safe space for students to enter without being harassed by reporters. Inside the school's gymnasium, an impromptu assembly was taking place. Students filled the bleachers, many wearing shirts they'd stayed up all night making. "My crown, my choice," and "Protect Black Hair" messages stood out in bright colors against the sea of faces. "I never thought this would happen here," one student told a local reporter who'd been carefully vetted by the school administration. "But look at how we're all coming together. That's the real story." At the front of the gym, Mrs. Williams stood with Destiny, whose hair had been beautifully restyled by Ms. Rose, a local salon owner with 30 years of experience. The shorter cuts somehow made her look stronger, more determined. "What happened yesterday was terrible," Destiny began, her voice carrying across the hushed gymnasium. "But look at what's happening today. Look at how many people are saying enough is enough." Outside in the parking lot, a steady stream of delivery drivers arrived with food and drinks, all donated by local restaurants. The school cafeteria staff worked alongside parent volunteers, setting up a community lunch that would last all day. "When my daughter told me what happened," one restaurant owner said as he unloaded trays of food, "I knew we had to do something. Food brings people together, and right now we need to be together." Social media continued to explode with support. Local celebrities and influencers shared their own stories of hair discrimination. The hashtag Justice for Her Crown had evolved into hashtag #ProtectOurCrowns, with people sharing pictures of their natural hair and stories of resistance. In the school library, converted into a temporary community center, civil rights organizations set up information booths. Lawyers offered free consultations to students and families who had experienced similar discrimination. Mental health counselors made themselves available to anyone who needed to talk. "This isn't just about one incident," a community organizer explained to a group of interested parents. "This is about changing the system that made it possible." The teachers weren't sitting idle either. During their lunch break, they gathered in the teachers' lounge to draft a proposal for the school board. They wanted mandatory cultural sensitivity training, reviews of all dress code policies, and clear guidelines for school resource officers. "We should have done this years ago," Mrs. Chen admitted, still carrying guilt about her role in the initial incident. "But we're doing it now, and we're doing it right." By afternoon, local barbershops had joined the salon owners on the front lawn. They set up chairs under bright umbrellas, offering free haircuts and styling to anyone who wanted to show solidarity. The sound of electric clippers mixed with music and conversation, turning the school grounds into a celebration of community and identity. "My grandfather opened this barbershop 50 years ago," one barber said as he carefully trimmed a student's hair. "He faced discrimination back then, and here we are, still fighting the same battles. But look around, we're not fighting alone anymore." News helicopters circled overhead, capturing aerial shots of the growing crowd. What had started as a school event had turned into a citywide movement. People drove from neighboring towns to show support, many bringing supplies, food, or simply their presence. In a quiet corner of the library, Destiny sat with a group of younger students, many of whom had their own stories of feeling different or being singled out. She listened to each one, her presence offering comfort and strength. "You know what my mom always says," she told them, her voice gentle but firm. "Change doesn't just happen. We make it happen, one day at a time, one voice at a time." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the school grounds, Principal Rivera made one final announcement over the outdoor speakers. "Tomorrow, we return to regular classes," she said. "But we return changed. We return stronger. We return united." The community day was ending, but its impact would last. Local businesses had pledged ongoing support for anti-discrimination initiatives. Civil rights organizations had established permanent connections with the school. Most importantly, students who had felt alone now knew they had an entire community behind them. On the front steps of the school, Mrs. Williams hugged her daughter, both of them watching as volunteers cleaned up from the day's events. "You know what's beautiful?" Destiny asked, touching her newly styled hair. "It's not just the support, it's the change we're creating together." The courthouse steps were crowded with people as Destiny and her mother walked up them, hand in hand. The morning sun caught the beads in Destiny's newly styled hair, creating tiny rainbows that danced around her shoulders. News cameras tracked their progress, but kept a respectful distance. The court had issued strict guidelines about media coverage. Inside the courtroom, Officer Miller sat at the defendant's table, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the polished wood panels behind him. His attorney looked nervous, shuffling papers and whispering urgently to his client. They had good reason to be worried. The evidence against Miller was overwhelming. "All rise," the bailiff called out as Judge Thompson entered the courtroom. The judge, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes that could turn steely in an instant, took her seat and surveyed the packed room. "Before we begin," she announced, her voice clear and firm, "I want to remind everyone that while this case has garnered significant public attention, this is still a court of law. We will proceed with dignity and order." The district attorney stood, her opening statement ready. Behind her, rows of spectators listened intently, students from Lincoln High, teachers, community members, and civil rights activists. They all watched as she laid out the case against Miller. "Your Honor," she began, "what happened at Lincoln High School wasn't just about a haircut. It was about power, prejudice, and a complete violation of trust. The evidence will show that Officer Miller's actions were not only criminal, but part of a broader pattern of discriminatory behavior." As she spoke, images appeared on the courtroom's display screens, still frames from security cameras and student videos. Each one told part of the story, building a timeline that left no room for doubt. The prosecution's first witness was Principal Rivera. She described the events in careful detail, her voice steady but emotional as she recounted trying to stop Miller. "In all my years in education," she testified, "I've never seen such a blatant abuse of power." Throughout the morning, a parade of witnesses took the stand. Mrs. Chen described the initial classroom incident, her voice breaking as she expressed her regret for involving Officer Miller. Students testified about previous encounters with him, painting a picture of intimidation and bias. During a brief recess, Destiny sat in the courthouse hallway with her mother, watching people hurry past. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think this will really change anything?" Mrs. Williams squeezed her daughter's hand. "Look around," she said softly. "It already has." She was right. In the week since the incident, 3 other school districts had suspended their resource officer programs for review. The state legislature was fast-tracking a bill about police presence in schools. Civil rights organizations reported a surge in people coming forward with similar stories. Back in the courtroom, the prosecution played their strongest evidence, the complete security camera footage from Principal Rivera's office. The room fell silent as they watched Miller's actions unfold in stark, unforgiving detail. Several jurors wiped away tears. Miller's defense attorney tried to argue that his client was just enforcing school policy, but his arguments felt hollow against the weight of the evidence. When Miller himself took the stand, his attempts to justify his actions only made things worse. "I was maintaining order," he insisted, his voice defensive. "That's my job." "Your job," the district attorney countered during cross-examination, "was to protect students, not assault them." "Let's talk about your previous complaints, shall we?" As she began listing incidents from his personnel file, complaints that had been buried, warnings that had been ignored, Miller's facade began to crack. His hands trembled as he gripped the witness stand. The afternoon sun slanted through the high courthouse windows as the jury foreman stood to deliver the verdict. The room held its breath. Destiny gripped her mother's hand tighter. "On the count of assault on a minor, guilty. On the count of civil rights violation, guilty. On the count of abuse of power under color of authority, guilty." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder in the silent courtroom. Miller's shoulders slumped as reality set in. His attorney immediately began talking about appeals, but everyone knew this was the end. "Before I pronounce sentence," Judge Thompson said, looking directly at Miller, "I want to address the deeper issue here. Your actions didn't just hurt one student, they betrayed the trust of an entire community. That trust is sacred, and its violation cannot go unpunished. As the judge detailed Miller's sentence, multiple years in prison, permanent loss of his law enforcement certification, mandatory cultural sensitivity training, Destiny felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about setting things right. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, but Mrs. Williams had something else in mind. She led Destiny to where a group of students waited, young people who had been inspired to speak up about their own experiences with discrimination. "Remember," Destiny told them, her voice strong and clear, "justice isn't just about what happens in that courtroom. It's about what we do next. It's about making sure this never happens to anyone else." 1 year later, Lincoln High School looked very different. The morning sun sparkled off a new sign in front of the building, Cultural Heritage Center, dedicated to understanding and respect. Inside, the former security office had been transformed into a warm, welcoming space filled with books, artwork, and photographs celebrating diversity. Destiny, now a senior, walked through the hallways with purpose. Her hair had grown back, styled in beautiful natural curls, but she wore it differently now, not just as a crown, but as a symbol of change. Students smiled and waved as she passed, many of them wearing buttons that read, "Our differences make us stronger." "Can you believe it's been a year?" Principal Rivera asked as Destiny entered her office for their weekly meeting. The two had become partners in transforming the school's approach to cultural sensitivity and student safety. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Destiny replied, settling into what had become her usual chair. "Other times, it feels like a different world entirely." And in many ways it was. The changes that had started at Lincoln High had rippled out far beyond the school's walls. The state legislature had passed the Crown Act Plus, comprehensive legislation protecting cultural expression in schools and workplaces. Officer Miller's case had become required reading in police academy training programs across the country. In the school library, a group of students gathered around a table, working on projects for the new Cultural Understanding class, a required course that had replaced the old study hall period. Mrs. Chen, whom now co-taught the class, watched with pride as students shared stories about their heritage and family traditions. "Remember when we were afraid to be different?" One student asked during a presentation. "Now we're afraid not to be. Different is what makes us special." The school's approach to security had changed dramatically too. The new community safety team included counselors, mental health professionals, and community liaisons. Instead of armed officers, trained mediators helped resolve conflicts through understanding and communication. "It's not just about keeping people in line anymore," the head counselor explained to a visiting education committee. "It's about creating an environment where everyone feels safe being themselves." Outside in the courtyard, a new mural stretched across the wall, a collaborative project between students and local artists. It showed hands of different colors weaving together, creating a tapestry of unity. Below it, younger students gathered during lunch breaks, feeling safe to wear their hair, clothes, and cultures proudly. Mrs. Williams had taken the case's momentum and channeled it into lasting change. Her law firm now ran regular workshops for students interested in civil rights and advocacy. Today, she was back at the school for a special assembly. The gymnasium buzzed with excitement as students filed in. On stage, a panel of speakers waited, educators, activists, and lawmakers who had been inspired by what happened at Lincoln High. But the most powerful speaker was Destiny herself. "A year ago, I stood in this same gym, scared but determined," she began, her voice carrying to every corner. "I didn't know then that what happened to me would spark such change. But that's how transformation works. It starts with one moment, one person standing up, and others joining in." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. The hardest part wasn't what happened that day. The hardest part was deciding what to do with it. We could have let anger win. We could have let fear take over. Instead, we chose to build something new. In the audience, teachers nodded. They remembered the old days of rigid rules and punishment. Now their classrooms were places of dialogue and understanding. Even the dress code had been rewritten with input from students, parents, and cultural leaders. After the assembly, Destiny walked through the halls with her mother, pointing out the changes. The old security cameras were still there, but they seemed less threatening now, more like quiet guardians of the new atmosphere of trust and respect. "Look at this," Destiny said, stopping at a bulletin board covered with college acceptance letters. Her own was among them. She'd been accepted to law school on a full scholarship. This is what happens when you let people shine. As they reached the front doors, they passed a group of new students touring the school. One girl, nervous about her hijab, brightened visibly when she saw the "All Cultures Welcome Here" sign. "That's why we keep telling the story," Mrs. Williams said softly, "not to remember the hurt, but to show how far we've come." Outside, the afternoon sun caught the beads in Destiny's hair again, creating those familiar tiny rainbows. But now they seemed to point forward, toward a future where no child would fear being themselves at school. "You know what's amazing?" Destiny asked, looking back at the school building. "We didn't just change rules or policies, we changed hearts. And that's the kind of change that lasts forever."